first time I noticed something was wrong. It was stupid. A book out of place. That was it. I've always been particular about my shelves. Alphabetical. Left to right. Fiction above nonfiction. I've been doing that since before the internet ruined people's attention spans. So when Dostoevsky suddenly stood next to Dickens, I knew someone had touched them. Not just touched, shifted. Moved. Like they were testing my memory, or maybe their own. I live alone. My wife passed 6 years ago. No pets. No visitors until recently. His name was Sean, son of my late army buddy Mark. Mark died last winter. Left behind nothing but a battered truck and a son I'd last seen at age 13. The kid had been polite back then. Awkward. Soft-spoken. I remembered him as someone who watched everything in silence. Like he was trying to solve you before you noticed him doing it. He messaged me out of the blue 2 months ago. Said he needed a place to stay just for a little while. Things hadn't worked out with his last job. He was trying to reset. That was the word he used, reset. I owed Mark more than a few favors, so I said yes. Sean moved in the following Tuesday. Just one duffel bag. Quiet, same as before. Too polite. Said he'd help around the house. Said he'd cook. Didn't say how long he planned to stay. That was fine, I told myself. He was family in a strange kind of way. But then the book moved. And then the toothpaste tube in the bathroom suddenly flattened from the middle, not the end. And then I found my laptop lid slightly ajar. It was the little things. Not enough to confront. Just enough to watch. So I started locking the study door at night. I never said anything. Sean never asked why. That was the first game we played. The second started with my bank. I went to pay a gas bill and saw a login failure warning. My password had been changed. Reset link requested 2 days ago. Not by me. I called the bank. Asked for the IP. They wouldn't give it, of course, but they confirmed it was from my city. No fraud, they said. Just a mistake. Probably me. Forgetting something. But I don't forget. Especially not things like that. So I reset the password. Added two-factor. Then bought a motion-activated camera. Put it in the hallway just outside the study. I didn't tell Sean. The next morning I watched the footage. 3:41 a.m. My door creaks open. My door study was locked. But the camera caught the hallway. Caught Sean standing outside it. Holding a butter knife. Turning the handle. Just standing there, motionless. For nearly a full minute before walking away. I didn't sleep the next night. But I didn't say anything either. Why? Because I wanted to know how deep this went. He hadn't stolen anything. Not yet. But something was happening. Something slow. I began to wonder. Was I being robbed? Or replaced? The next morning, Sean made eggs. He was humming. Not a tune I recognized. Just some shapeless, content little sound that made my skin itch. He moved confidently in my kitchen. Like he'd done it 100 times. Like it was his. I watched from the doorway. How'd you sleep? He asked. Didn't, I said. He laughed, like I was joking. I sat down and sipped my coffee. He served the eggs, perfectly scrambled. No crusts. My wife used to do that. He couldn't have known. Busy night? I asked casually. He shrugged. Read for a bit. Went to bed early. Not a twitch in his eye. No guilt. Just smooth, easy lies. I wanted to grab him by the collar and ask him what the hell he was doing at 3:41 a.m. with a butter knife outside my study door. But I didn't. Instead, I smiled. Ate the eggs. Cleaned the plate like nothing was wrong. Because the only thing worse than being played is showing your hand too soon. That afternoon, I checked the study door again. There were faint scratches near the lock. Not fresh, but not old. I ran my fingers along the wood. I know this door. I refinished it myself. Those scratches weren't there before Sean moved in. Still, I said nothing. Just made sure to swap the camera's memory card and stash the footage on a spare drive. One in the garage. One in the glove box. One on a flash drive I wore around my neck, tucked under my shirt. I don't panic. I prepare. That night, I left my study unlocked. Just to see. Just to tempt. I even turned the hallway camera off. But what Sean didn't know, what I hadn't told anyone, was that I'd installed a second camera, hidden inside an old VCR in the living room, pointed straight at the hallway mirror, which reflected the study door. The old tricks are still the best ones. At 3:38 a.m. he came again. No knife this time, just gloves, a quiet step, a flashlight covered in red film so it wouldn't glow too bright. He paused at the study, pressed his ear to the door, then turned the knob. Open. He looked around, then entered. I watched the reflection of his back vanish into the room I used to keep locked, the room where I'd since planted a trap. He was in there for 16 minutes. When he came out, his face looked disappointed. Good, because the papers in the drawer were fake. The folders in the cabinet were old tax returns and blank checks I'd marked void in bold red letters. The real documents, passports, bank books, ID backups, were in the attic behind insulation, sealed in waterproof plastic. He never even thought to look up. The next morning, I found his shoes in the hall, a fine powder on the soles. White. I followed the trail back to the study, and there it was, just a faint bit of dust along the windowsill. He'd opened the window, from the inside, and that told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't about theft. It was about insertion. Sean wasn't trying to take my things. He was trying to become me, and he was getting better at it. 3 days later, a letter arrived from the IRS. It was addressed to me, but the return address wasn't one I recognized. Inside, a confirmation of change of address, and a note thanking me for updating my personal information. I hadn't. I stared at it for a full 5 minutes before moving. My hands didn't shake. My jaw didn't clench. I trained myself out of those reactions long ago. I checked my bank again. Still locked down. No new activity. Same with Social Security. But something had slipped through. Someone had filled out a government form and mailed it as me. That meant someone had my social, my signature, and access to my mail. I looked out the front window. Sean was in the yard, raking leaves. He looked up and waved. I waved back, then closed the curtain. That night, I checked the hallway camera again. Nothing. Checked the mirror reflection. Nothing. He was getting smarter, so I stopped baiting him. Instead, I started watching myself. And that's when it got worse. The coffee tasted different. Not bad, better. Closer to how Alice used to make it, with the cinnamon in the filter. But I never told Sean that. The music in the truck radio had changed. My presets were gone. In their place, stations Alice used to love. Old blues, Appalachian folk. Then came the real hit. The pharmacist called me. Just checking. Did you want to switch to the generic brand of your heart meds? You came in last week and said you'd changed providers. I hadn't been in that pharmacy in over a month. Sean had. He must have used my name. My ID? My insurance card? I keep them in my wallet. My wallet hadn't moved, but I had a spare one. In the top drawer of my bedroom dresser. A backup from years ago. Empty. And used. It was gone. Or rather, it was different. Same brand. Same wear. Same color. But the scratch along the bottom corner? The one I'd made in 2009 when I dropped it in the driveway? Gone. He'd replaced it. Reconstructed it. Just close enough to fool a glance. Not a memory. That night, I searched his room while he was at the grocery store. Nothing obvious. Nothing sloppy. But in the closet, behind a false panel in an old luggage case, I found a brown envelope. Inside, a driver's license. Mine. Same name. Same address. But the photo, it wasn't me. It was him, Sean, staring into the camera with my name under his face. I sat down. I didn't panic. I read every line of the ID, every signature. Even the organ donor box was checked, just like mine. This wasn't identity theft. This was identity construction. And I was the blueprint. I put everything back exactly where I found it. Then I went to the garage, pulled the dusty lockbox from the back shelf, and opened it. Inside, the last gift Mark ever gave me. A snub-nosed revolver. Registered. Clean. I wiped the dust off the handle. And waited. That weekend, Sean cooked dinner. Roast chicken. Rosemary. Carrots glazed with honey. Tasted exactly like Alice used to make it. Down to the damn plating. He didn't ask how I liked it. He already knew. We ate in silence, as usual. Except this time I didn't look at the food. I looked at him. At how he cut his meat. How he wiped his mouth. How he adjusted his sleeves. He'd watched me. Learned me. He wasn't imitating anymore. He was rehearsing. And I was the dress rehearsal. You ever think about settling down? I asked casually. He smiled. Maybe. Not yet. Someone special? He shook his head. Not lately. He wasn't rattled. Not even curious why I was asking. After dinner, he cleared the table, wiped the counters, and even refolded the dish towel the way Alice used to. One corner turned over, perfectly diagonal. It was the most threatening thing I'd seen in years. Later that night, I sat in my truck for 2 hours. Didn't go anywhere. Just sat. Watched the porch light. Thought. The thing about people like Sean, they don't just want what you have. They want the space you occupy. They want to replace the gravity you pull. And they're patient. They'll water your plants, clean your gutters, smile at your neighbors, until no one remembers where you ended and they began. But I remembered. And I knew how to erase a man better than he knew how to build one. The next morning, I made coffee first. Left the cinnamon out. No bait. I asked Sean if he'd pick up a few groceries. Told him I'd pay. He nodded, took my card, not a spare, the card, and left. That's when I made the call. I had a buddy named Curtis. He worked IT for the state. Owed me a favor from way back. Curtis, I said. I need to know if someone's applied for anything in my name. Anything recent. Give me 20 minutes, he said. Took him 15. David, he said, my name. Someone filed a name correction form at the DMV 2 weeks ago. Photo attached. He sent the image. It was Sean, wearing my jacket, standing in front of the DMV camera, smiling, like he'd already won. Curtis kept talking. Said the guy hadn't just applied for a new license. He'd filed for a change of address, initiated a credit file transfer, and even requested a duplicate Medicare card. You want me to flag it? He asked. No, I said. Why not? Because I want to see what he does next. I thanked Curtis, hung up, and sat in the kitchen until Sean came back. He walked in like he lived there, put the bags on the counter, said, they were out of rye, so I grabbed whole wheat. Good call, I said. He smiled. He thought he was ahead. He thought the character was fully built. But what he didn't know was simple. This was never a game of addition. It was subtraction. And I'd just started sharpening the knife. That night, I slept with the revolver under my pillow. Not because I expected violence. Sean wasn't that kind. He was too elegant for confrontation. He operated like smoke, drifting in, filling every space until you forgot what the room had smelled like before. But I kept it close anyway. Not out of fear. Out of principle. At 2:13 a.m., I heard the floorboards creak. Old house. Every step writes its own story. I didn't move. Just lay there, eyes open, listening. Then my door. The knob turned. Slowly. Then a pause. Then it clicked shut again. I waited a full minute before rising. Slipped on slippers. Quiet. The hallway was empty. I checked the study. The kitchen. Nothing. But when I returned to my room, something was off. My drawer. It had been opened, then closed. Not fully. Just barely ajar. Inside, my wallet sat half an inch to the left. And the photo of Alice and me, normally tucked behind my license, was gone. That's when I decided it was time. The next morning, I called the lawyer. Roger, I said, you still handle power of attorney documentation? Of course. Everything all right? Not yet, but I'm getting there. We met at his office 2 hours later. I had him draft a living trust, moved all liquid assets to a new account under that trust, removed access to my name, closed the utilities in my own, forwarded my mail to a P.O. box. I even had him file a notice of identity tampering with the local clerk's office, just in case. By noon, I had erased myself from every place Sean could touch, except one, the house. So I drove home, parked in the garage, and opened a bottle of bourbon I hadn't touched in 6 years. poured a glass, sat in the study and waited. Sean came in an hour later, grocery bags in hand. "You switched brands?" he asked, lifting a bottle of olive oil. I nodded. "Time for change." He smiled. "Feels good, right?" I looked at him. Really looked. He wasn't copying anymore. He was living it. My expressions. My cadence. The way he nodded at the end of his sentences. The pauses. The silence. It was all me. Except it wasn't. And that's what saved me. "You ever think about buying a place of your own?" I asked. He shrugged. "Maybe someday." "You should," I said. "Would suit you." He chuckled. "You think?" "I do," I said, finishing the bourbon. "And I've got just the place in mind." That was the beginning of the end. Because what he didn't know, what he couldn't imagine, was that I wasn't planning to kick him out. I was planning to give him exactly what he wanted. Just not the way he expected. I made a list, not of what he'd taken, but of what I was going to leave behind. I started small. The spare bedroom, the one he slept in, I repainted it. Pale blue, same as it was before, but a little colder. Moved the dresser an inch off-center. Just enough to make it feel unfamiliar. Then I removed the mirror from the hallway. The one he used to check his face before leaving. Took it down while he was out, boxed it up and put it in the attic. Day after that, I swapped out the coffee brand. Then the soap. Then the radio presets. Nothing drastic. Just subtraction. The things he'd used to shape his version of me gone. Replaced by silence. Gaps. Little holes where his character used to find structure. He noticed, of course. But he didn't say anything. That wasn't his style. He just lingered longer at the fridge, paused before using the stove, looked a second too long at the empty hallway wall. His foundation was starting to slip. The next move was the hardest. I told him I'd be gone for the weekend, visiting a cousin out of town. Left Friday morning, suitcase in hand, drove 2 blocks, and doubled back through the alley. Parked 3 streets away. Then I snuck back in through the basement. Quiet. Careful. I stayed in the crawl space. Slept on foam padding. Ate from a thermos. I waited. And I watched. I had rigged a new camera system, this time inside the house. Hidden lenses behind vents. Power drawn from the light fixtures. Sean didn't suspect a thing. That Friday night, I watched him unlock my study with a key he'd never asked for. He moved like he belonged there. Sat in my chair. Opened a notebook. Not his. Mine. Or one of mine from 20 years ago, one I'd lost. I didn't even know where it had gone. He read aloud from it. Practiced lines. Like a script. Tried different inflections. Then he leaned back and sighed. Said, out loud, "I could do this. I could really do this." Then he went to the liquor cabinet, poured a glass of my bourbon, and toasted the empty room. "To David," he said, "the man who taught me how to disappear." He didn't know I was 3 feet under him, listening. Didn't know I had the whole thing on video. The next day I left. For real this time. Packed a single bag, took the truck, and vanished. No note, no goodbye. But I left the deed to the house in an envelope on the kitchen table. His name already on it. Along with a copy of the video. No threats. No accusations. Just a gift. He wanted my life? Fine. Let him carry it. Every wall. Every creaking floorboard. Every silence soaked with memory. He could have the shell. Because the weight, that stayed with me. I rented a cabin up north. Middle of nowhere. 1 road in, 1 out. No neighbors, no mail, no cell reception unless the wind hit just right. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't comfortable. But it was mine. And more importantly, it was empty. I didn't bring photos. Didn't bring Alice's things. Didn't even bring my books. Just a duffel, a thermos, and the revolver still clean. At night, I'd sit on the porch and listen to the trees. Not think. Not plan. Just listen. I didn't know if Sean would stay in the house. Maybe he'd sell it. Maybe he'd gut it. Maybe he'd sit there like I used to, waiting for a knock that never came. Didn't matter. Because I wasn't him. I wasn't building a life out of someone else's bones. I was finally letting mine breathe. 2 weeks passed before I saw the name. Sean's name, on a credit report alert I'd forgotten to disable. He'd taken out a store card, applied for a loan, using the identity I'd left behind, the half-finished scaffolding of David. But here's the thing. I hadn't just given him my name. I poisoned it. Every file, every account, every traceable trail was tagged, flagged, and timestamped. I'd filed my own death certificate through a friend in the coroner's office. Not official. Not legal. Just enough to trigger a bureaucratic glitch. David, on paper, was now deceased, pending verification. Any attempt to use that name would spiral into red tape, confusion, and questions Sean wasn't ready to answer. And soon enough, they started asking. He tried to renew the license, flagged. Tried to refinance the house, frozen. Tried to open a checking account, blacklisted. Then he made the mistake I knew he would. He called me. I still had the burner phone, just in case. It rang twice, then silence, then his voice. You think this is over? I didn't answer. You think you won? Still nothing. You don't know what you've done. You think you're clean. You think this makes you safe? I waited 10 seconds, then said very calmly, You didn't take my life, Sean. I gave it to you. The question is, why can't you carry it? And I hung up. That was the last time I heard his voice. 2 months later, I drove back downstate, just to see. The house was still there. Lights off, grass overgrown, windows dusty. A single notice stapled to the door. Foreclosure proceedings initiated. He hadn't lasted long. I stood at the curb, looked at the house, thought about going in. I didn't, because it wasn't my home anymore. It was just a hollow copy of a life I'd already left behind. Let the dust keep it company. I turned around, got back in the truck, and drove north. I never filed anything official. No police report, no fraud claim, no civil suit. What would I have said? Someone tried to become me? They'd call it delusion, or worse, paranoia. And besides, I didn't need the system to validate what I knew. I'd won already, quietly, completely, without headlines, without handcuffs. Sean was out there somewhere. I knew that, living under a name that collapsed every time he tried to use it, pulling on a mask that no longer stuck. There's a kind of justice in that. Not loud, not cinematic, but honest, poetic, like watching a snake swallow itself. Back in the cabin, I kept a routine. Early mornings, black coffee, long walks through pine. I didn't speak much, didn't write. I let the silence grow roots. But sometimes, at night, I'd open the burner phone, just to check, just to see. One day, there was a voicemail. No number attached, just a message. It was short, 15 seconds, maybe. Congratulations, Sean's voice said. Calm, almost impressed. You win, but just remember the skin doesn't forget. Then a click. No threats, no demands, just that line. The skin doesn't forget. I deleted it, and never checked that phone again. That winter I got sick. Just the flu, but it hit hard. Reminded me I wasn't young anymore. Reminded me that solitude cuts both ways. I thought about Alice a lot. About what she'd say if she saw what I'd become. Then I realized, she wouldn't be surprised at all. She always said I had a quiet kind of cruelty. The kind that waits. The kind that doesn't flinch. Maybe she was right. Spring came. The trees filled in. The road softened. The birds got louder. I started writing again. Not memoirs. Not letters. Just observations. How snow melts faster in the spots you forget to watch. How some echoes only answer back once. How identity isn't something you wear. It's something you earn by not giving it away. One afternoon, I walked to the ridge behind the cabin. There's a cliff there. Not dangerous. Just high enough to see the valley. I sat there with a thermos and a pen. Wrote one sentence. He tried to take everything from me. Then I crossed it out. And wrote instead. But I gave him nothing. And for the first time in a long, long while, I didn't feel like a man disappearing. I felt like a man returned. Not to a place. To himself.